Good morning. Today we're going to continue our segment on how commercial subcontractors can be your biggest asset or maybe your worst nightmare. So we're going to talk about a little bit about those and continue from the last segment that we're doing. As we said in the last segment, subcontractors can be a very valuable asset for you to use, so you don't have to have people and equipment and lots of management personnel sitting around when you're hoping to get a large call, but then maybe you don't get a large call. So it cuts way down on your overhead when you're able to use subcontractors to come in and help you do some stuff like that. So one of the subcontractors you can use is commercial drying or deskant drying services. There's a couple of ways you can do that. You can have a subcontractor that simply brings you the equipment out and drops it on the sidewalk and leaves. You can have a subcontractor bring it out and set it up for you. They may also bring it out and set it up for you and help you monitor the equipment and make sure the equipment continues to run. Part of the advantage to that is as a service provider in most states, not every state, but in most states, check with your state law, you don't have to pay sales tax on that equipment. If you simply rent equipment, bring it out, drop it on the sidewalk and leave, then you are going to pay sales tax in most states. In the ones you don't, you can sort of look at that person that stays with that equipment being free of charge because you're not going to have to pay sales tax. So now they are giving you a service, not giving you a just a piece of rental equipment. One of the other advantages you will see when you rent equipment from a lot of places, they'll have a clause in there to where you can buy, or you normally automatically wind up buying and paying for insurance for the equipment while it's in your possession, or what they would call in your care, custody, and control. If someone is bringing you equipment and servicing it for you, keeping it fueled, keeping it maintenance, then that equipment is not in your care, custody, and control, and you don't have to provide insurance for that because they're providing you with the service and bringing it out for you. Another situation that you avoid by having the service provided from a subcontractor would be if something happened to the machine that was due to neglect or operator error or vandalism. One good example of that with deskant dryers are letting the generators run out of fuel. And if you're familiar with large commercial generators, when they start to run out of fuel, they'll start surging on and off, up and down. They start sucking air, and that causes the engine to fluctuate. When that engine fluctuates, so does the power. So now instead of running maybe 480 volts to that machine, all of a sudden 1 second you're running 200 volts, and the next second it kicks back on and you may go to 500 volts, and then back to 2 and back to 5 until the machine finally gives it up and is all the way out of fuel. Well, that surge can cause lots of problems within a lot of equipment that you may be running off of that generator. It can cause motors to burn up. It can cause relays to fry and breakers to trip. Hopefully the breakers will trip, but a lot of times they simply don't. Also, you can have the internal components of the system to overheat because the blower motor is cut off and it don't have time to go through the cool down phase of operation as it would normally need to do. So when somebody's providing you a service and something happens to that generator, when it runs out of fuel, or could be a stopped up fuel filter that would cause a surge in it or something like that, it's another situation that you avoid. Diesel spills can be quite common if people are not fueling or paying attention to how they're fueling and maintenance and equipment. So that's another thing that you'll help with that. And last but not least, it just gives you another layer of professionalism that you have on the job site when you have somebody there that can take that piece of the pie off your plate and let them operate that part of it for you while you're doing other things. When you get ready to start buying equipment, when you're considering, do I want to buy equipment, or do I want to subcontract out a service, or do I want to rent equipment? The things that you'd want to look at is quality of the equipment. A lot of the equipment you buy, you can get the cheapest brand that they make, or you can get the most expensive brand. But a lot of times, until you've run the equipment on several projects, you're not really sure which one will do exactly what you would like it to do. So it's good, even if you're going to wind up ultimately buying equipment, is to try the equipment out a little bit before you do that, maybe with a subcontractor or with a rental company to do that. Technology and changing technology. When you buy a piece of equipment, you're normally going to buy one of these larger pieces of equipment for an extended period of time. You're going to keep that piece of equipment several years. But as technology changes, service provider companies usually will upgrade their technology and sell off the equipment that whose technology has become a little bit outdated, or they will upgrade their equipment to keep it in line with the newest technology. So a lot of times when you're using a provider, your technology will be better also. Fuel efficiency is going with everything. Everything now is getting more fuel efficient. Used to be something as a drying contractor that you didn't worry about a whole lot, but it has gotten to be a bigger and bigger concern as we go through a lot of different adjusters and consultants and stuff like that now. They want to see something that's a lot more fuel friendly. Some of these large generators burn up to 9 to 10 gallons of fuel an hour to run a typical deskant. If you're using a very large generator, then you may actually get one that burns 20 or 30 gallons an hour. And during a storm or a hurricane, fuel can easily go up to $4 or $5 a gallon. I know it's pretty cheap right now, but if it goes up to 4 or 5 gallons per hour, then needless to say, your fuel bill is going to be pretty large. So fuel has become an issue. There's also different types of equipment that runs on different types of fuel. Some of your deskant dryers will run on all electric. Some of them will run on electric, and the heaters may be fired with diesel fuel. Some of them run on electric for the blower motors, and the heaters may be fired with propane. So make several different types, and that's things that you'll want to look at as you're selecting which type you want. The advantage of using them on a rental or a subcontract basis would be to play with them, to learn about them, kick the tires, so to speak, when they're out on your job sites, and see which one that you like the best. Extra payments and cost on a lot of restoration jobs. When you get a very large project, you start thinking about the amount of money and the things that you're going to make on that job, and a lot of people will run out and they'll buy new equipment with that money before they get paid on that job. But then they turn around and they may get in trouble if they don't get paid on the job in a timely manner, or forbidden that they don't get paid on it at all. So some of those things happen. So usually want to look at buying equipment on a controlled basis and within a budget rather than buying on the spur of the moment. You're a lot safer off when you do that. Also safer off if you set it up on monthly payments instead of trying to take all of the money out of one large job that you would get at one time when you get paid for it. Knowledge of using the equipment. Some of these dryers, if not all of them, are sort of like flying an airplane. It's a nice piece of equipment to have, but if you don't know how to operate it properly, it'll get you in trouble. These pieces of equipment are no different. Touched a little bit already on the different types of flamethrowers that you may have that run the heating in these: diesel, propane, and all electric, and they all come with their sets of pros. They all come with a set of cons. Electric seems to be a little bit easier to use, but the generators that you have to run the electricity end of all that are huge. Probably starting at 150 kW to run all your heaters and all your blowers, and that's about 8.5 to 9.5 gallons of fuel per hour. So it changes your fuel consumption, which makes it a lot less efficient, but more importantly, it keeps somebody going back and forth to get fuel all the time unless you have a fueling company. Another problem with those 150 kW and larger generators is weight. You're looking at about 10,000 pounds for a generator of that size. So you are carrying an extreme amount of weight. I know in some of the other classes we have talked about DOT standards and trucking regulations and stuff like that, and sort of plays back into that there. If you get a desiccant dryer that weighs 3,000 pounds and a generator that weighs 10,000 pounds and a trailer that weighs 5,000 pounds, you're beginning to get overweight, or already would be overweight in that. It also goes along with air movers and the weight of those, and what type of air movers that you might want to be using. I know we've got axial air movers, you got centrifugals, and you got radials. Each set of those air movers have pros and cons to them as well. I know you're probably already familiar with air movers and which types that you might have. Another type of and which type you like. And you know, they're different for each job. Obviously, the best dryer is the axial air mover. It puts out a lot more air, and air volume is the volume of air is what we all get air movers for. However, they're very loud. They're also fairly large in size. They take up a lot of space, both when you're hauling them and when you're putting them on site. So the radial air mover is the smallest in size, but it generally speaking would put out the smallest amount of air volume, which makes the drying process maybe go a little slower, but they're about half the size, if not a little smaller than that, of your axial air mover. But again, your experience with air movers and which one you like best. But you may take that, for example, you may get on a commercial job and it's an empty building, it's not occupied, or it is occupied and they've shut down to give you a few days to dry it, and you may want to use actual air movers on that, even though you normally use the radial or centrifugal that has less air volume. So it gives you a chance to get through all of that and figure out which one's best for which job, and be able to change which type you use just by simply calling your subcontractor and telling them which one you'd like to change to. Again, pros and cons of leases versus buying, and projected budgets, and buying stuff on a budget is simply cash flow. I've seen a lot of people get in trouble running out buying thousands of dollars worth of equipment and different stuff like that, and then again, when they don't get paid on the job, then they get into buying fairly quick, trying to figure out how to get the payment made on it, or if they've just bought it on a 30-day net, how to get all that done when they don't get paid for it that quickly. Cash is king. Keep your cash flow in line, and usually everything else falls at the beginning. The cons to it, you got a higher cost over time because you're not paying for it up front, so there's going to be some interest rates that will go with that. And if it's not interest, that just means they charge you a little bit more for it when you purchased it, because there's no free lunch. So if you're not paying interest, they're going to be charging more for it up front. the times that you're paying for lease will stretch out to where if you buy it all at once and just pay for it, you're over and said and done. May not have made any money on the job, or may have lost a little money on the job, but at least you got it stretched out. Another thing you want to look at when you decide which of those two to do is your taxes. Can you expense all that in 1 year, or do you have to space it out over 5 or 6 years, depending on the dollar value of the asset? So if you're having to space that out over 5 or 6 years, it makes that tax bill a little easier to swallow if you're also paying taxes on it over 5 or 6 years, rather than paying for it all at once and then still having to expense it slowly as you go. Let's talk about your contracts with subcontractors, and this is probably one place to where a subcontractor can be a nightmare. When you write any contract, whether it be with the person you're doing the work for in the building, or whether you're doing a contract with a subcontractor, the author of the contractor has a responsibility of making that contract plain and understandable. So if the subcontractor gives you his contract to sign, then it's his responsibility to make sure that it's plain and it's understandable. A good contract should have 3 or 4 different things in it that make a good contract. One of them should have a good scope of work. If you're going to pay somebody to do something, or you're going to get paid to do something, either one, then you've got to know, and so does the person on the other side of the contract, know exactly what is expected. The more detailed your scope of work is, the less problems you'll have in a subcontract or a contract, either one. The next thing you have to know is, when are you going to get the services that you're requesting performed? Some people write a start date in a contract or a subcontract. Some people write a finish date in a contract or a subcontract. And some of them may have both. But you've got to know not only what service you're getting or what service that you're paying for, but when are you going to get it. Thirdly, but most importantly, you've got to know what you are paying the subcontractor that you're hiring for those services. And you've got to know exactly what you're paying him for the scope of work that he's doing. And you've got to know that if that scope of work changes, then that price will change as well. Then you should obviously do a change order. The worst situation you get into is you pricing a job for X amount of dollars to your client, and then you make an agreement with the subcontractor, and then that subcontractor's price goes up, because way too often your price may not be able to go up. And probably last but not least, on the subcontractor, you've got to know when you're going to pay the subcontractor. And some people will write into their contracts that I will pay you when I get paid. And that all sounds good in the beginning, and the subcontractor may even agree to that. And you may have an agreement that you'll pay him when you get paid. However, that portion of the agreement won't stand up in court or in an arbitration if you were to have to go to court in arbitration. What's your provision if you don't get paid from the insurance company? What if you're doing the project and the claim gets denied? What if you're doing the project and the insurance, the job you're doing for the building owner has a tenant in it, as most commercial properties would, that you'll be doing, and the tenant's insurance company and the building owner's insurance company get to having a conflict over who's going to pay. I've seen those conflicts run out into several years before. Now, at that point in time, neither one of them saying they don't owe you for the money that for the work you've done. They're just having a disagreement on who's going to pay it. And way too often, these will go into 2, 3, 4 different insurance companies. You will either have a building owner that has insurance up to a certain amount, and then he has reinsurance. So that would involve 2 different insurance companies. The tenant may have the same thing, or there may be multiple tenants. So I've seen projects stretch out as far as 6 years while they're arguing about who owes the money. And guess what? At the end of the 6 years, they got it all weeded out. But in the meantime, if you had a big subcontract bill and you had to go ahead and pay your subcontractors and all your fees up front while you're waiting on them to argue for that money, it could put you in an awkward situation that you don't want to be in. Now, one way of helping with that problem is to enter into joint ventures with some of your subcontractors. You obviously can't enter into a joint venture with every subcontractor you come in contact with, but let's say that you're entering into a joint venture with someone who is providing air movers and dehumidifiers for you on a commercial project. You've all seen the consultants that come in and they will tell you they're not going to pay overhead and profit on a project, and a lot of people agree with that and say, well, I'll just put my markup in the line item. But some people say, no, I'm going to keep my line item in line with customary rates, and I'm going to charge overhead and profit. A lot of the consultants come in and say, we don't pay overhead and profit on mitigation, and that starts a big argument. But as soon as they realize you rented air movers and dehumidifiers from a subcontract company, then they want to come in and say, well, show us your rental bill, and we'll give you 10% overhead and 10% profit on that. Well, 5 minutes before, they said they weren't going to give you overhead and profit. So, they sort of talk out of both sides of their mouth on some occasions. When you rent a dehumidifier air mover, you're normally paying somewhere close to about 50% of the normal customary fee that a restoration company charges for it, whether that be basing it off of something like Exactimate or your time and material rate schedule or just your normal rate schedule that you use day in and day out. So, and let's just use round numbers. So if you normally get $100 a day for a dehumidifier, you may go to ABC Rental and rent one for $50 a day. So you're making a good profit on that. You're making $50 a day for every day you have that one piece of equipment out. Until the adjuster comes in and says, well, just show me their bill and I'll give you overhead and profit on it. So then you get into that argument, and if you lose that argument, then you're getting $60 for that dehumidifier and you're paying $50, and so that didn't make it such a good deal. One way to stop that is enter into a joint venture with your subcontract or rental company that would say, we're going to charge based on my time and rate schedule, and you're going to get half of the money and I'm going to get half of the money, or whatever your agreement is on those particular line items. That sort of stops the consultants from coming in and chopping your legs out from under you on rental invoices and stuff like that. So just a little point, if you want to talk in more detail later about the joint venture agreements, give me a shout and we'll do that, but don't want to spend too much time on that at one time. So again, some of the things you want to look at buying equipment, a good point about it are tax advantages. We've all had tax incentives lately, particularly with the situation that the world's going through right now. You may get to write off 100% of it in the first year you buy it. So sometimes that may make a year-end purchase, be very favorable if you've got the cash flow to do it. Keep in mind when you're buying equipment that even though it is tax deductible, it takes away from your cash flow. And again, cash is king. Another advantage having it's sort of kind of like bragging rights. Hey, I've got 250 air movers, and that's gives you the bragging rights and the confidence of knowing you can go out and get a good sized job running. Part of the cons to that would be knowing you've got those 250 air movers sitting around and you're only using 50 of them once a year. So they're sitting in your warehouse, taking up space. They collect dust, and you have to clean them and take care of them. You most likely would have them insured, so you need to take care of the insurance on them. You've got to house them. If you've got them in a shelf, they're taking up warehouse space that most of us are all a little bit tight on anyway. Or maybe you go out and buy a trailer to put them in, so now you're paying for a trailer and you're paying for insurance on it. So different pros and cons to doing it either way. I would say either way you choose to go, you're better off not to make these situations when you're standing on the sidewalk getting ready to do the job. That never puts you in a favorable position to make a business decision. Sit down with your budgets, sit down and with your checkbook in your hand, and make sure that if you've got the money to make a purchase, that you plan your purchase out and you purchase it well ahead of time, and that you plan your work and work your plan. If you do that, you usually won't go wrong like you may do if you do something on the spur of the moment. I hope today's topic on subcontractors has been helpful. If you have any questions about it or need anything, I am Scott Darpley, and give me a call at any time. Thank you.